Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Tonight, we turn down a forgotten trail where the forest swallows the road, and where one cabin hides a hunger sharper than any blade. The woods did not welcome strangers. Branches arched low, knotted like fingers, blotting out the sky in ragged curtains. Paths forked into dead ends, and the silence was constant. No birds, no streams, only the patient hum of insects beneath the bark. Deep in this thicket, a cabin squatted on uneven stone. Its chimney coughed faint smoke, and a sickly light burned in the single window. Once, it had been a hunter's lodge, but time had worn it into something less welcoming. Shingles sliding, steps sagging, a roof line that seemed to lean too eagerly forward, as though listening for footsteps. The one who lived there was a tenant, a shadow of a man, lean, restless, muttering. He had come from nowhere, rented the place for solitude, and filled its walls with knives. Rows of them, hooks glittering with steel, cutting boards scarred with grooves. Night after night, he honed the blades, whispering recipes to himself in a voice like gravel stirred in a pot. The locals spoke rarely of him, but when they did, it was in shudders. For every hiker who stumbled into that stretch of woods, every lost traveler who thought the cabin's light meant safety, none were seen leaving again. On a storm-swelled evening, the forest floor softened with rain, and a lone wanderer followed the smell of smoke until the cabin rose before them. The door creaked open. A thin figure stood there, apron stained, blade in hand. His smile was too wide, his welcome too quick, and the woods listened as the door shut. The cabin's interior was warm, too warm. The air carried the heavy scents of charred fat, sour herbs, and something metallic that lingered at the back of the throat. Pots bubbled on the stove, though no firewood burned beneath it, steam rolling in unnatural coils toward the ceiling beams. The visitor stepped inside reluctantly, their boots pressing into sticky floorboards. The walls were lined with knives, dozens of them, hung in neat rows, each one polished to a gleam so sharp it seemed to drink the light. Hooks dangled above, swinging gently through no draft stirred. The chef moved with a twitching grace, his apron stiff with old stains, his sleeves rolled to expose pale forearms scribbled with knife scars. He hummed softly to himself as he cleared the table, laying out a fresh cutting board that bore deep grooves, as though something stronger than meat had been carved there. "Not many people pass this way," he said, voice smooth but strained, like a string pulled too tight. "You must be tired, hungry." The visitor tried to smile, tried to excuse themselves, but the chef's eyes cut sharper than his blades. He set a pot onto the board, tipped it toward them, and from within came not soup, but a broth that reeked of copper. Floating in it were shapes too small to be animals, too distinct to be vegetables. Fingers, boiled pale, curling in the steam. The visitor staggered back, but the chef was already between them and the door. His knife, long and gleaming, caught the firelight. He tapped the blade gently against the board, the sound carrying through the cabin like a clock counting down. "Sit," he whispered. "You'll spoil the recipe if you keep standing." The visitor's pulse thundered in their ears, but the chef's humming was louder, steady, tuneless, like the sound of a whetstone dragged endlessly across steel. The cabin seemed to shrink. Shadows bent forward, pooling at the corners of the room. Every hook above the counter now swung in unison, their motions no longer random, but purposeful, like pendulums marking the rhythm of the chef's preparation. He laid the knife flat on the board, fingers caressing its edge with reverence. "Every cut has a purpose," he murmured, almost to himself. "Every dish deserves precision." The visitor tried for the door again, but the wood groaned and split beneath their hand, swelling shut as though the cabin itself had no intention of letting them out. The air thickened with steam, so hot it burned the lungs. From the stove, another pot rattled violently, its lid bouncing. When it flipped free, the contents hissed onto the counter, bones blackened, some still jointed, still clutching fragments of cloth. The chef's smile stretched, trembling at the corners. "You're fresh, rare, a guest I can work with." He lunged. The knife's edge caught the dim light, a slash that sang through the air. The visitor toppled into the table, scattering utensils that clattered like bells. Their hand fell onto something wet and cold. A tray already prepared, holding pieces far too human, arranged neatly as though awaiting garnish. The chef's humming grew into laughter, low, jagged, broken. He drove the blade into the board beside their face, wood splitting like bone. "The secret," he whispered, leaning close, breath hot with rot, "is tenderness. Flesh gives way if you know where to cut." The hooks above shivered. One dropped with a shriek of metal, embedding in the table just inches from the visitor's hand. Others began to tremble harder, chains rattling in unison, waiting to descend. And all the while, the chef stood poised, knife gleaming, smile unending, ready to carve his masterpiece. The hooks began to fall, one after another, shrieking down from the beams, clanging against the counter, piercing through wood and flesh alike. The visitor scrambled, but every corner of the cabin became a snare, pots boiling over, knives clattering from shelves, the stove roaring to life with a flame too bright, too hungry. The chef moved with impossible speed, a conductor in his own grisly orchestra. His blade flashed, carving not wildly, but with surgical elegance, each stroke practiced, perfected. His laughter bled into his humming, then into words hissed between clenched teeth. Every meal deserves a guest. Every guest deserves a meal. The visitor's scream was swallowed by the forest outside. No one walked that road at night. No one to hear, no one to save. And then, silence. When dawn crept through the trees, the cabin stood still and quiet, smoke curling faintly from its chimney. On the porch, a single parcel rested neatly on the step, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, as though waiting for a delivery that would never come. The paper was damp with something dark, seeping through in slow, steady drops. Inside, the chef sat at the table, apron freshly cleaned, knife resting in its place among the dozens of others. His eyes were calm, his hands folded neatly. He had eaten, and in the woods beyond, the birds did not sing. Listeners, there are cabins in the wild where solitude grows teeth and silence sharpens into a blade. Step too close, disturb the wrong soul, and you may find yourself not at the table, but on it. Subscribe to the vault and never walk alone again. Listen in the dark, watch with the lights off, and remember, some recipes are written in blood. See you in the next story, if the woods let you out.